Okay. Do-do-do-do. Hey. Even though I bury my head into some really hardcore books, a la Telsla, Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, Maxwell, and others, and also, there's nothing more brain-crushing than translating ancient Greek metaphysics. Ultimately, everything is irreducibly simple. I'm not ever going to be accused, well, people could accuse me of it, but I'm never going to be found guilty of the fact of complicating Mother Nature. I mean, ultimately it is very simplex and simplistically reducible. I've said this before, that there has never been a point in time anywhere in history or currently where there have been postulated any two foundations. Kind of like when you build a house, you got to lay a concrete foundation upon which you build the rest of the thing. There have never been any two foundations postulated or put forward or theorized, except for two. One being atomism, yeah, and the other one being, the correct one by the way, the ether. There's never been other than these two. One is completely illogical, follows Occam's razor, and the other one's completely untenable. There's a word everybody should learn, by the way, untenable. Untenable meaning unrealistic, is impossible, kind of like unicorns and leprechauns, right? It's phantasms. These are nonsenses. By the way, I also want to get something else out of the way. I've actually quoted Telsla, Heaviside, Maxwell, Dollard, and others who said there's no such thing as an electron particle. I said everything is fields and fields are not particles, but at no point in time in any video have I ever denied, the fundamental particle, nuclear particles. It is a scientific fact of which I am in full agreement with, rarely so, but am in full agreement with scientists who said that like a free neutron, after something like 17 minutes, turns into a proton. Well, if all neutrons turn into protons, then what we call a neutron is nothing other than an electrostatic paradigm as it sits in situ in the nuclear center, that we would call it something else. So ultimately, and this of course would follow Occam's razor, there's only fundamentally one particle. And I've never at any point in time denied nuclear particles. Never. I've actually been accused several times recently and people are just putting words in my mouth because I've never, ever denied nuclear particles. I've not. I have said that they are dielectric condensates, somewhere in the order of 60 to 100 magnitudes, maybe even higher than that of gamma radiation. Now, these nuclear particles are nothing other than ZTPs, or zero-time particle. They're basically, and I say this humorously, however it is also denotatively very descriptive, so it's both humorous and descriptive. I've called it jokingly hard light, which is, I love calling it hard light because it is both denotative and funny, and it's easy to remember. I call it hard light, and it sounds kind of ridiculous, but fundamentally, this would be the reconciliation of light and matter. It'd be the reconciliation of a lot of things, and it would also follow Occam's razor. So I've never at any point in time denied particles. But moving on, we also have two paradigms, and one, of course, as I've already stated, one is atomism, the other one is the ether, but there are also two other paradigms that fall in line with that scientists and people that are theoreticians and experts on field theory, a la Telsla, Steinmetz, Heaviside, Maxwell, so on and so forth, they keep talking about. The atomists are always talking about waves in space. Now, there's no such thing as a wave. A wave is not a thing. That would be like saying, I saw happiness or I saw sadness. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Who did you see that was happy or sad? It's like, no, I saw happy. It's like, you're smoking crack. Put down the crack pipe. These are not things. These are attributes. Like, I'm happy or I'm sad. That's an attribute of me or of you. We can't say, I was walking down the street and I saw sadness. And people would be like, what are you smoking? What sort of illegal drug are you smoking? What's wrong with you? Did you fall and hit your head? These are not things. Waves are not things. Waves are what things do. But scientists love to talk about waves, and they love to talk about bending space. You might as well be talking about bending unicorn farts. You might as well be talking about, what color is Poseidon's beard? It's like, well, this is a fictional nonsense. We don't need to argue over Poseidon's beard color because there's no such creature. It doesn't exist. It's a phantasm. The notion of bending space, Tesla said it famously over and over again. This is why he called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot and a lunatic. It's because you can't bend space because space has no properties. Also, too, it is a hardcore fact that no field modality has ever terminated in space. Space is not a terminal or a ground for a field modality. I assume you know what an electrical ground is, right? No charge or discharge has ever terminated in space. Space is not a terminal. You terminate in counter space. We say subspace or zero-point energy, you can say with the ether, but space has no properties. It only has attributes, like a shadow. A shadow is not a thing. A shadow is an absence of light. There's no distinction between a shadow, and there's no also distinction of space because it has absolutely no properties. This is complete and utter nonsense. This is concept reification, by the way. This is posterior attribute reification. It actually falls under the heading of several different fallacies. So on the one hand of the idiot atomists, we actually have talk about waves and space. But waves don't exist, and space has no properties. You can't bend space. On the other hand of logical folks who actually have logically forwarded the ether, and what is the ether? The ether is non-Cartesian pure potential. All field modalities, whether that be electrostatic or magnetic, there are ultimately only two, and those are the two conjugate geometries of the universe, specifically the toroidal geometry of force and motion and the hyperboloidal geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration. Electricity is phi times psi equals q in Planck of electrification. In other words, it's a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. And gravity is not a field at all. Gravity is an anti-field. Specifically, gravity is mutual mass acceleration. It is electrostatic acceleration. It's dielectric acceleration, actually. But they're not actually also accelerating towards one another, but they're actually accelerating towards the lowest pressure point of counter space. Let's ask a question here. If I had an empty box, which I don't have right here in front of me, I got something similar to a box. It's kind of a box. This is empty. It's a lens tube. Would you think that the air inside of this box is a property of the box? I'd like you to think about that question for a second. If we actually want to talk about reifying space, which has no properties, would the air inside of this box be a property of the box? Think hard about that before answering this one. Is the air inside of a box a property of the box? And the answer is no. By changing the nature of that air, or say vacuuming out that air, creating a negative vacuum, would that change anything about the box? No, it wouldn't. No, you might say, well, if you actually evacuate it enough, you'll actually collapse the box, but that's called taking the analogy too far. Science has never, ever defined a field. The ancient Greek word is kora. Kora. It's never defined a field. What is a field? If you can't explain it simply, you simply don't understand it. That's actually a quote from Einstein, ironically enough. That's one thing he got right, just like a broken clock. It was right twice a day, right? A field is an ether perturbation modality, just like ice, water, and steam. Now, if you're an ignorant child, you would think that ice is one thing and water is another and steam is another. Steam is hot and gaseous, and water is wet and liquid, and ice is hard and cold. Oh, these are different things. No, they're the same thing. They're just different temperature and pressure modalities of water, right? Yes. There's no need for a grand unified theory because from the perspective of Mother Nature, natura naturans, everything is already unified. We don't have to unify what's already unified. The only reason we can't unify it is because human beings are too stupid. That's correct. There is only the conjugate geometries of force and motion, inertia, and acceleration, specifically dielectricity and magnetism. We've already explained away gravity. We've already explained away electricity as a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism, which also makes explaining how an electromagnet works really, really easy. A lot of people will spend like 20 pages explaining what the hell an electromagnet is and how it works. You can explain it really, really easy if you understand what electricity is. But, yeah, a field is an ether perturbation modality, just like ice, water, and steam is a temperature and pressure modality of, specifically, usually it's the temperature modality, but a temperature and pressure modality of water. But science has never defined a field, because to define the field, you would actually have to first posit the ether, but they are afraid of positing the ether. They do it cryptically. They actually will call it quantum foam. There's like 100, there's not 100, well, almost 100. There's about 4 primary things they actually call the ether without using the word ether, because saying ether to a modern scientist who is not really a scientist or a mathematician is like crying out the devil in the middle of Sunday school. You know, you just don't do that. You don't talk about the ether, because that's the big E word. It's the evil word. You can't talk about the ether. When you talk about the ether, you completely destroy the foundation of atomism. Atomism is built upon fallacy reifications and nonsense. Talk about waves and space. Space has no properties. There's no such thing as bending space. Time is only a measure of magnitudes. Time is not a thing at all. Time is the number 4, by the way, and it's also the only number missing the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence, which is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Take a long time to explain that one. Every ancient culture said time is the number 4. But time doesn't exist. Time only exists. When this is present, that is present. When this is not present, that is also not present. When there's no magnitude and mass present, then there is no time present. Time is not a thing. It is a measure. But anyway, getting back on topic. When you reify these nonsenses like waves, and waves are not things, and space, which has no properties, nor can you bend space. It's like saying that a shadow has properties. Shadow doesn't have properties. It has attributes, because if you stand in a shadow, you're going to feel cold. Right? Well, that means a shadow is something. If I stand in a shadow and I feel cold, then that means a shadow is something. No, it doesn't. It's called posterior attribute reification fallacy. That sounds really fancy, doesn't it? A shadow doesn't have any properties. That it has attributes does not give credence to it as pure subjectivity from a philosophical and metaphysical standpoint. Neither does space. So, forgetting about atomism, not really forgetting about atomism versus the ether, there's 2 things that the atomists always discuss. They talk about waves and space, which are not things at all, nor do they have properties. And you actually have those who accurately, logically, and intelligently, and in complete line with Occam's razor, talk about the ether and ether modalities. And these, of course, are the likes of Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, James Clerk Maxwell, Oliver Heaviside, Eric Dollard, and me. Not that I league myself in with them, I'm just saying me, I also. And in which case, those who actually postulate the ether, we actually talk about, not stupidly, waves and space, but we're talking about frequency modalities and the ether. We're literally talking about the essence of what something is, and we talk about the frequency modalities, whether that be dielectricity and magnetism, and actually how these interact and what they fundamentally are. Natura naturans, or Mother Nature, is really simplex, but it's not simple. But it is irreducibly simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Once we actually get the atomistic and particle nonsense out of the way, and I never denied fundamental nuclear particles. I never, ever, ever did that. Never. I did deny that electrons exist, because they don't exist. Their so-called mass is an electrostatic interaction that is presupposing a mass. And this is, of course, nothing other than an extrapolation of force force equals mass times acceleration. Therefore, we're reifying, the force involved, electrostatic force, as a mass, and that doesn't give credence to an electron. But Nikola Tesla, Oliver Heaviside, these people said that there's no such thing as an electron or a charge-carrying particle, and I am in complete agreement with those geniuses. There is no such thing as an electron. It's a pure arbitrary abstraction. There's no such thing as a light particle either. A photon. This is BS. This is what the cult of atomism has given you. You can't actually explain light and the nature of light by particles. Light doesn't move from point A to point B. It's not an emission. It doesn't have a speed. That so-called speed is a presumed rate of induction. You can never explain light speeding back up without breaking the law of conservation of energy, after it leaves mediums like water and glass. Just ask a scientist, "Excuse me, Mr. Scientist, how does light speed back up after it leaves glass or another medium without breaking the law of conservation of energy?" Their brain will implode. Either that or they'll poop their diaper, because they don't know the answer to anything. And it's okay not to know. But the problem with idiots with PhDs and academia by and large is that they're full of themselves. They never go looking for the answers to things because they think they have a firm grasp on what the answers are, but they don't. And it's a truism that nobody in history has gone looking for the answer to something that they think they already know the answer to. Yeah? You've never gone looking for the answer to what your name is, right? You know what your name is, right? Why would you ever, investigate what your name is? You know what it is, right? It's the same thing with these academic idiots, these PhD professors of academia. They are fools. It's okay not to know the answers to stuff. Those are the people that, and if you also have to have a sense of discovery and inquiry, but it's great to not know. It's like, I don't know. I want to know. I don't know now, but I want to know. The academicians and these PhD professor idiots of academia, I know. I don't need to look for the answer because I already know the answer. Like, no, you're a friggin' idiot. Period. And with that, I rest my case. As I say in Russia, большое вам спасибо и увидимся. I hope you like these videos. If I seem a little tired, it's because I am. I'm still jet lagged from that Florida trip. Not really jet lag, I'm just kind of exhausted from doing 1,000 things. Which is what I do all the time, is 1,000 things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Peace out, Girl Scout. It's going to get really cold tonight. Yeah. I'm going to wrap up warmly. Goodbye.